Hello, hello, and welcome to PD in your PJs. I'm so excited to be here with you to talk about Google and how to use Seesaw and Google Drive. You're going to hear so many wonderful ideas tonight from Holly and Tanya, and I'm so excited that they've agreed to be with us. You should hear me talking now. I do want to tell you that we're recording the session, and if you're registered, you'll receive that in an email shortly after we conclude. The best part, though, is that we'll share the slides, so you'll get those in the same email, and you can click through those at your convenience later and look at all the wonderful images and resources that Tanya and Holly are sharing. We will save time for a few questions at the end, so if you think of something that you want to ask our presenters, just type it in the question box. Quick introduction, my name's Julie. I was a high school ELA teacher for 18 years. Now I'm on the teacher community team at Seesaw. Go ahead and find me on Twitter. I'm at EdTechJulieJ. Give me a follow because I share lots of tips and ideas about Seesaw. And of course, you can connect with our whole team on Twitter at Seesaw. Now, I do want to remind you that our presentation tonight is not about getting started with Seesaw or setting up your class for the first time. So if you are in need of that kind of information, please visit ideas.seesaw.me because you'll have lots of helpful info there. And then check for the upcoming webinars that might be of interest to you as well. You'll see those on a calendar at web.seesaw.me/PDs. One other quick thing I'd love to ask you to do when we conclude tonight, a survey will pop up on your screen if you are watching us live, and we love your feedback, so please take a minute to give us some answers to those survey questions. That's how we discover what other topics you might be interested in. We also randomly choose one t-shirt winner at the end of each week, so you can complete that survey for your chance to win. I am so excited, though, to be able to turn it over to our guest presenters, Holly Clark and Tanya Avrith. How are you guys doing tonight?
Really good. This is
so
Holly,
excited.
and I'm doing good. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Tanya, and I'm so happy to be here.
Okay, here we go. And Holly, we're seeing your screen now. So I'm going to turn it over to Holly and Tanya and let you drive the slides from here. I'm going to mute myself, and you guys can take it away. We're so excited to hear what you have to share with us.
So thank you very much. And I'm Holly. I'm going to start. And I'm also going to be progressing the slides, which could get a little crazy when Tanya starts to talk. But one of the things that we have become known for is our book, The Google-Infused Classroom. And the Google-Infused Classroom, although it says Google, it's not just about Google, it's about other tools. And one of the tools that we highlight is Seesaw. And it's because we love the way Seesaw follows along with our technology integration kind of framework that we do. And we're going to talk more about that. But I'm Holly Clark. I'm the blonde one. Tanya is the funny one. And she is she's in Boca. Well, actually, you tell them where you're from, Tanya.
Well, I'm originally from Montreal, Canada, and I now live in South Florida in Boynton Beach. So about 15 miles from Boca. So you weren't so far off. So I'm so excited to be here. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. And we know how precious your teacher time is. So we really want to give you ideas and strategies that you can use tomorrow in your classroom. And that's really what our book is about, really providing those teaching and learning opportunities and ideas for your classroom tomorrow that are really ingrained in pedagogy. So go ahead, Holly. You want to share a little bit about our contests?
Yeah, so we'd love if you have these slides. I'm going to go back because I want you to be able to get onto the slides so that you can get onto the Padlet. So if you go to bit.ly/Seesaw, and the S in Seesaw is capitalized and the G in Google is capitalized, so Seesaw Google, you can get to these slides and you can follow along with us. And if you get to the slides, and we'll share them again at the end just in case, you can get to this slide, number 2, we'll call it, and it says, leave your best Seesaw and Google Drive idea. And we're going to look at that, and we're going to keep looking at it until March 15th. And when you leave an idea on this Padlet, and I think I can actually bring this Padlet up. I'm going to do that right here. So right now, it shouldn't have anything on it, but if you go down to the bottom right-hand corner, actually, you don't have to do that. You could just double click anywhere, and you can put your Twitter handle. If you don't have one, maybe you could put an email. I don't know if you want that to be super public, but I'm going to put my Twitter handle, and then I might give my best Seesaw and Google idea, which is using HyperDocs. And we're going to look at that, and we're going to reach out to you and give you a free book if it's something that we feel like was really good. And I've been known to be super generous and give out like 4 because I couldn't decide. So you have a really good chance of winning, since we're both super generous that way. So you have that opportunity to win the book. We're going to give until March 15th because we know people watch this later on, although I see there are many of you here, and I really appreciate so many people coming at 4:30 or whatever time it would be on your side of the world. So we have that. And another thing that we want to talk about, or what we are going to talk about. So we're going to talk about why Google and Seesaw, and I'm going to get to that, how it all works, the digital workflow of everything. So if you don't even know what digital workflow is, we'll try and explain that a bit. And then we're going to leave you with 3 classroom ideas and 1 bonus, so that you have something you could use in your classroom tomorrow, because that is something Tanya and I feel very strongly about. We're teachers, we got stuff to do just like you do, and we just need a couple good ideas and we go try them. But if someone overwhelms us, then we sometimes don't do it. So we're going to talk about that and how you can be a digitally fluent educator, which is something we'll talk about in a minute. But our whole framework, and the reason that we love Seesaw so much, is because we believe that good technology integration happens when teachers do these 3 things. When they use the devices in their classroom to make student thinking visible. And I feel like Seesaw is the making thinking visible machine. Like whenever I quickly need to know what my students are thinking, what they've learned, have them comment on something, I can just say, please go to your Chromebook and open it up, go to our activity or whatever we're doing and let us know in Seesaw. And because it's kind of closed and just our class and maybe some parents, it feels like the safe environment where they feel safe to make their thinking visible. We also believe that hearing from every student is key. I have a kid right now that is in our class, and I'm going to give him a different name. I'm going to call him John. And John is a kid who, if in normal circumstances, I think John would flunk 5th grade. But because we have Seesaw and some of the other tools, I can hear from John all the time. He can't write really well just yet. And when we ask him to answer multiple choice questions, he's confused by too many answer choices. And because on Seesaw, he can get on, press the video, and tell me what he's thinking and what he's learned. I'm able to assess what he knows. And he feels confident, he feels successful, and it's a really good way of using technology in the classroom to meet his needs and every kid's needs. So the idea of making thinking visible, hearing from every student, and allowing them to share their work. I hear kids all the time say that Seesaw is just like Facebook, Ms. Clark. And at first I'm like, oh, no, it's not, it's better. But really, to them, it's like being on Facebook, as we do things during the day, and they love it. Their parents love getting notifications that they posted something or we posted something in Seesaw. And it's just this really great way to use technology to really get at teaching and learning. And a lot of times when people get technology in the classroom, they use it to type a paper or maybe do some online searching, or they try and like fit something that they're doing and put technology on top of it. Instead, Seesaw allows us to take what we're doing in class and amplify it by hearing from every kid what they're learning, doing really, really rich formative assessment throughout the school day. And it's so easy because kids, it takes 2 seconds to explain to them Seesaw. By the time the 2 seconds is up, they're explaining to me what I could be doing in Seesaw. So one of the things to realize about our students and why this works for them is because our students who sit in our classroom are Generation Z. And that means that they are the kids who were born from 1995. And I want you to think about something for a moment. These kids have never known a world without Google. They don't even know there wasn't Google because they're born since, or they were tiny if they were born before, but most of the kids who sit in our classroom were born after. And so when we open a textbook or we give them information in a very static way, they look at us like, what are you doing? Like, information is much more dynamic. Classrooms can be more dynamic than that. And I'm using a word dynamic from my friend Casey Bell, who just wrote a book about it, and really good stuff in thinking about dynamics in a classroom. But so we have, we know that they were born into a world with smartphones, tablets, and computers. They've only known social media, most of them, that we've had this Facebook, Instagram world. They prefer to do things that are hands-on, and Seesaw lets them kind of use their devices to record stuff and to capture that stuff that they're doing that's hands-on. They enjoy social learning experiences, and Seesaw simply is social learning. And when kids share their work with each other, they get to see how other kids say stuff. So like, they might see that my answer that I gave is a little different than another kid's, and they might hear the differences and think, huh, that's interesting. I didn't think of saying that way. Or, hey, no one else said the things I did. I'm pretty good at this. And that social learning experience gives them a chance to learn metacognitively, to think about thinking. Also, one quick other thing, Tanya's probably like, excuse me, I need to talk now. But we know this about cognitive. So cognitive scientists are really doing a lot of research around how kids learn. And one of the things that they have that they're really learning a lot about right now is that when kids have a cognitive struggle, when they have to think about something, put it together, say it articulately, and do it in a way that makes sense on the fly, that's called cognitive struggle. And when you have that, that's when you take learning with you. That's when it becomes kind of foundational, and you can now go to the next step. And we've been doing a lot of multiple choice tests and teaching. And in that, there's not a lot of cognitive struggle. Kind of figuring out maybe which answer choice is right, the tiny bit of cognitive struggle, but having to say into the video portion of Seesaw what you learned in that chapter, tell how you solved a math problem while you solve it. That's a cognitive struggle that gives us really rich information about student learning and growth. And we know they like to create. Seesaw does all of these things and meets the needs of our Generation Z learners. Instead of looking at them and going, oh, they're hyper-connected, oh, they are always on their devices. Let's use them for great teaching and learning. And that's what we want to talk about today. So I'm going to give it over to my friend Tanya, and you're going to get to hear her voice now. Tanya.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for that great kind of intro to kind of the framework in terms of why we're doing this and why we're using these great tools. I'm going to change the conversation a little and talk a little bit about why Google and Seesaw. So for so many of you, you're probably very similar to me. I teach K-5, and I'm in a school right, and we use Seesaw with Google. And so I think sometimes when you start having all these tools and access to all this technology, you start to think like, why would I use this and that? Why, if I already have Google, why would I use Seesaw? If I already have Seesaw, why do I need to use Google? And I think the conversation has to kind of shift a little and look at how we're using this kind of Google-infused classroom and using all these different tools, these tools, these technology tools for learning, because there's different purposes to using different tools, and ultimately what we're using them for might vary depending on what we want to do and see happening in our classroom with our learners. So by using this Google ecosystem, we're working in a very digital environment where everything flows together. Having access to Google Apps or the G Suite, or just having accounts for our students, allows us to access the web in ways that we couldn't do 5 years ago or prior to having access to a Google account. So you can log into things, you can access different tools, you can access the web in a really powerful way. Now, the G Suite tools are really powerful collaboration tools. So having access to both the G Suite tools, and Seesaw is extremely powerful because Google and Seesaw will help your students understand how to work in a digital environment and have everything flow together. So Holly, can you just switch to the next slide? Thank you so much. So when we're looking at these Google tools, a lot of what I do with Google is the front end collaboration. Before getting into Seesaw, I'm not using Seesaw for collaboration. That's not necessarily what I'm using it for. When I want kids to collaborate, to work in slides together, to build stories together, to work in docs and get their thoughts out, their brainstorming, this is the most powerful tool that I can use. It's easy to use, and I'll get a lot of the initial brainstorming through this tool. I'll also have students access prior knowledge and share their ideas. I do this a lot with my G Suite tools. And then with creation parts, I do a lot of work in Seesaw. I call Seesaw the Swiss Army knife of apps. And not just on iOS, but on the Chromebook as well, because I can have my students take pictures, take screenshots. I can have my students add videos. I have them reflect. I can have them demonstrate their learning. I have them creating emoji stories. I have them creating notes. So in terms of the creation elements, it's so incredibly powerful because I can have my students really make their thinking visible in very powerful ways with these two different ecosystems together. So it's not about having Seesaw or G Suite. It's really how can the G Suite and Seesaw work together. So how does it all work? So it's actually extremely simple. When you're going to click on the little plus button and you're able to, say, well, what is it that you want to do? One of the options is add file. And you can see right over here, there's the little drive button. And so what that does is it accesses the student's drive, and it allows the students to convert their slides, docs, their Google Draw, Google Sheets, and this is the awesome part that Holly's going to talk about in a second, the Google Photos that are stored in Drive. And so the slides, docs, draw, and sheets turn into PDFs. So what's really nice about this is that if you have parents, if you have your parents attached to your Seesaw and you're working in Google Drive, it's really nice because it allows the parents to really see what's happening and allows students to reflect on their learning, even if it's not within the Seesaw ecosystem. So this is a really powerful tool that you can use through the Seesaw platform. So Holly's going to give you our first tip, because what we've done is we've curated 3 really powerful classroom tips and ideas that you can use tomorrow to get you started in understanding how you can really integrate the G Suite tools in your Seesaw classroom. So Holly, I'd love you to take away the first one.
So I'm one of those teachers who used to have iPads and now I have Chromebooks. And I'm always thinking to myself, man, it's so hard to get the photos from the Chromebook to where it needs to go. But with Google Photos, even on an iPad, saves the photos that the kids take in the cloud. Now, when we first got iPads, we saved everything on the iPad, and soon they were getting too much stuff on there, and it was causing a problem. So with Google Photos, this becomes a really powerful way that we can use Google Drive. So if we go back to this button that Tanya was talking about, and we hit it so that it says Google Drive, it's going to take us to, so we hit this button, it'll take us to Google Drive, and inside there, we can go to a folder. And in that folder, we can have images already in that folder that kids bring up, and they can draw and annotate and record on them and tell us more about their learning. They can label them and caption them just like they can on an iPad, but now we're just using Google Photos instead. And it's this beautiful thing that both Tanya and I kind of stumbled upon and went, what? This is the greatest thing, because getting photos in can be kind of hard. And also kind of curating photos that I want my students to use, especially the younger guys. I can put them in a folder. So when you go to select a file, you could either choose the folder or the images, because Google just houses all the images in one place, and depends on how you want the students to get those. But it becomes this magical place where you can kind of curate for the kids. They can then annotate and tell you more about something, and it's really, really nice. You can also go out on the web and maybe make a collage, save it in Google Photos, and then bring that back up. So it's this beautiful thing. And I think actually Google Photos has been my favorite part of Google Drive and Seesaw. Because we're kind of running close to time, Tanya, I'm going to let you go to the next one. But this becomes really powerful, and I'm really excited about Google Photos.
Oh, absolutely. And it's such a simple kind of thing that you might not even consider and think about, but having access to Drive and the photos in Drive and being able to curate photos for your students, especially students who are perhaps in K or 1 or 2, it really does help structure your potential lesson. So I think that's a great strategy to be able to do. The next tip that we have for you is around collaboration made easy. And I do this all the time. And I'm going to say something, and it might seem kind of like duh, but I wonder, like, until I started doing it this year, it wasn't so duh. So I have my students, instead of having students turn in 1,000 slides, because I'll share, like I will share in Google, in Seesaw, a slide deck that is, which I go into the sharing permissions in Google Slides, and I share it so that anyone with the link can edit. And then what I do is I put it into my Seesaw, and I allow every student to have access to it. So I share it. You can do it in activity, or you can just share it really just with every student. And I have them first work and get their ideas out and collaborate in a shared slide deck. And this way I don't have to go through 1,000 different slides, A, or B, 1,000 different notes. And I have them collaborate using, I tell them, okay, you're going to be on slide 1, you're going to be on slide 2, or, so every student is still working in the same slide deck, but they're all in one place. And so when I want to go back and use that as assessment for learning, it's really nice because everything is in one place. And I share that in my Seesaw. And it's really simple. They're just sharing it as a link. I get the link and I put it in, and all the kids are able to collaborate. It really saves time, everything in one place. I can see it then in my Seesaw. So that's a really easy collaboration idea. The next idea that I want to share is a bit more complex, and it has to do with hyperdocs. But as you're thinking about workflow and you're thinking about the way that you are structuring your class and how you're working with the technology so that it's all together, I want you to start thinking about that whole digital workflow. I use hyperdocs, and what they allow me to do is design how I'm going to integrate the different tools together. So, Helly, I would love for you to kind of explain the hyperdoc model.
Okay. And sorry about the slides there a second ago. So the hyperdoc model is a student-facing lesson plan, or really lesson design, in which you're kind of walking them through lessons where they can interact with each other. They can go explore and find something, that they can come back and put like what they found on a Padlet, and they're working at their own pace, and they're doing things that that are kind of already laid out for them, but includes collaboration, includes all of the 4 C's. And as you can see in this lesson one that we have here, this is just a template. So you would have an engage portion where you might have a video that tells them some background about something. Then you might have them go out and explore, where you might have curated some websites that they go and look at, or you might have them reading something. It doesn't have to be like out to the web. Then you might say, okay, stop, let's explain, let's talk about this. Or the explain could be the teacher coming back in a video and explaining, okay, you've learned this. Now I want you to think about this portion. And the kids might then explain too, using Seesaw. They might grab their Chromebook and say, okay, here's what I've learned so far, so you can do a formative assessment. Then they apply their learning. So now they're going to go out and kind of construct their knowledge based on the stuff they've engaged and explored. And so they're walking through the student-facing lesson design. And if you haven't heard of HyperDocs, it becomes this beautiful way that you can have kids doing inquiry. So we were doing today in 5th grade, we were learning about the colonies. And all I could think is the part that we were learning about needed to include a part about Hamilton. So I just stopped right there and I turned on Hamilton, and I have a really good relationship with both the kids and the parents. And the kids start singing about Hamilton because they all know it. And I thought to myself, that could have been a part inside of our HyperDoc that we didn't include. So it gives you the ability to kind of go out and go to other streams of things that you might not be able to do in a textbook. Okay, I'm done.
So I'll share an example of a HyperDoc that I use and show you how it works with Seesaw. So if you can go to the next slide. So at the very beginning of the year, every single year, I have my students create their own acceptable use guidelines. And this year, what I had them do is I had them create pledge videos. And so they created these beautiful pledge videos that were based on their acceptable use guidelines. And so what was really nice is that it was coming from them. And so I gave them this HyperDoc. And on it, you can see there's an essential question. I have their learning targets. And it's very clear. I engage the students. So and you can see how all the technology flows together. I access prior knowledge with a Padlet. I start them off by brainstorming and understanding where their thinking was. Then I have them explore and explain. So I'll have them answer some questions. I might have them watch a video and then explain their understanding. So I'm checking for understanding. And then what I want them to do is apply their understanding. And so I want them to demonstrate their learning. So in this case, I had them open up Adobe Spark, and they use Adobe Spark to explain their learning and demonstrate their understanding. And then this is where I have Seesaw come in, because then I have them upload or publish their videos. So they're using Seesaw to publish, and then they reflect, and I give them guiding questions for reflection. And then they publish them. When they publish them, I have it turned on so that the students can see each other's work. And I teach them about commenting. This is part of digital citizenship. And so in Seesaw, they're commenting. And then I might have them extend, and I have a flip grid, a grid that's dedicated to an extension where I might have them extend their understanding and talk and have place for further discussion. And so you can see how all these different digital tools, Padlet, Google Docs, Adobe Spark, Seesaw, Flipgrid, that's 5 different tools are all being used together. And I do this, Holly, can you switch to the next slide? I do this by sharing it with the students. I share it with them in Seesaw. So I'm using Seesaw as a place to actually disseminate these lessons. So as you can see, I don't know if you've ever used the activities section. So you can actually create activities now in Seesaw, which allow you to create these lessons. And so in this case, I've created my AUG. I can put my instructions. What's really nice is that I can add my voice instruction, which offers multiple modalities for instruction, to have more of a UDL design for all of my learners. So I can provide audio and written instructions. I can link my HyperDoc here, and then I can also create a template if needed to scaffold specific skills for some of my learners who might need that. And then underneath, I can add my assessment criteria for these skills. So what's really nice is that not only have I designed my instruction and I have the students being able to work through the HyperDoc, but now when they're turning everything is in one place, and I'm also easily able to assess their understanding. So this is a really, really powerful tool, and it all works so nicely together.
Tanya, I want to comment really quickly. I'm looking at the Padlet. We're having
bonus classroom idea.
Oh yeah, sorry, but I wanted to comment on the the Padlet. We're getting some really good responses there. It's really great to see. So the last bonus idea is you could also bring in forms. So Seesaw sometimes doesn't have the ability to do a survey or something that you might want to do. And you can now mash together, it's called app smashing, a Google form that you can make and put that Google form into Seesaw so that the kids can answer it. So that's a really good bonus. I've seen some really good examples of that. And so we just wanted you to know where you could connect with us. So if you have these slides up, you can go to our Facebook group. It's called Project Learn. We do a lot of really good stuff inside of Project Learn with other authors from EdTech Team Press. And of course, I'm at Holly Clark EDU. Tanya's at Tanya Avrith. And we just want to say, we hope that there are some ideas that you got in this webinar, and we're really thrilled by some of the responses already put inside of the Padlet. Were there any questions that came up?
Hi, Holly and Tanya. That was wonderful. Thank you for sharing so many great ideas. I do have a few good questions waiting for you here. I'll scroll through them and see if we can get a few before we run out of time tonight. Tara is asking if she can see samples of student creations. Are those in the notes to your slides, or can you add a few in there later maybe? Like they just want it, like some people want to see what the student creations look like. Like if you have a link to that, maybe throw that in if you have a chance.
Okay, and we can try and get that and put it in. Sure.
Yeah, if you have it and if it's handy. So if you're registered for the webinar and you're watching us live, you're going to get the email to the slides later, even if you don't have them open on your screen now. So that, that's a good idea maybe. Kathy has an interesting question too, and this is probably a digital workflow question that you all can weigh in on. She's saying if she is having her students create in all these different places like Padlet or Google Classroom or Boom Cards or whatever, and having all these different links to manage, she's finding it inefficient to manage the links of those places that the students are creating content. Thoughts about that, or are you just saying it's easiest to just dump all those things into Seesaw once they're created?
Well, I would go to HyperDoc for that.
Yes.
Okay. Exactly. Yeah. Do you want to talk more about that for a second?
Sure. That's why the HyperDoc is so powerful, because it not only does it facilitate the instructional design of your class, thinking about how you're going to plan your access prior knowledge, have checks for understanding, your formative assessment, your demonstrations of learning, your reflection, your creation, but it also manages the workflow of all of those links, and it puts it in a place so that it's easy to access. So the best way to do that is through this kind of design, and it's such a simple thing. It's just, I mean, I make mine look super pretty, but it doesn't even have to look so fancy schmancy. It's just a matter of organizing it in one place for your lessons, and also ultimately when it's time to come back to your lessons and use them, if you wanted to iterate them for the next year, you'd have them in one place, so that makes it a lot easier.
Okay, that's actually super helpful. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just trying to go to their website because I think we might be talking about something people may not have heard about before. So if you want to go over to hyperdocs.co, you can kind of do some investigation around there. They also have a book that you could get, but they also have a very, very robust Facebook group, just like Seesaw. So something to check out if you want to know more about HyperDocs.
Thank you. That is super helpful. I can tell maybe by the questions coming in that is a new concept for many of our listeners. Jason has a really good question too. He's wondering if you have really little learners who are uploading their own photos to Google Photos.
So we have it set up automatically, and especially for the little learners who have on iPads, we no longer have things automatically saving on the iPad. We have them saving to Google Photos, and you just go to Google Photos and you go to your settings, and you could just even type into Google, like, how do I get my photos on iPad to save automatically in Google Photos? And it's a quick and easy way of doing it. And that way all photos are saved on the web. And I'm assuming with the little guys, he's talking about iPads. And so it's done automatically.
Okay, that is super helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, you would definitely want to iPad, get the Google Photos app and turn it on. It is a beautiful thing.
That's a great point and a great reminder for our listeners. Anik is asking a somewhat related question, basically saying as the grown-up in the classroom, she has her own Google account and uses Google, but like her students don't have Google accounts. And she's wondering if that's a complicated process to get them all their own Google account or not. I mean, when I was in the classroom, we had IT people who would do that. I, as the teacher, was not creating Google accounts. But what are your thoughts on that?
No, so that's something that she would have to discuss with her administrator to see if they have a admin account that is registered to their school or their district. That's definitely not something that you want to do. Yes, exactly. Your domain. It's definitely not something that you want to do on your own, especially with your younger learners. Right, but
I've done it.
But it's not something you want to do. Your students have to be 13 legally to use to have an account, and we're teaching kids to be digital citizens. One thing that you can do, however, is, you know how I mentioned on my classroom idea number 2, collaboration made easy? A workaround for that would be providing permission on a shared slide deck where you give everyone access to edit. If you're doing that, then your students would not need an account, and that would be fine. They would be using a shared slide that you've created, and that could be a workaround in the meantime.
I actually think that's a great workaround. That's a great tip. Thank you for pointing that out, Tanya. Kathy is following up and saying, have you ever had any privacy concerns with photos in Google Photos and students uploading or having their photos automatically uploaded? You have any thoughts on that?
I have not.
I have not.
Yeah.
Because it's school-based, and especially if they're using, say, an iPad, it's usually something that we're doing school-based, and it would be a school-based Google account. So I haven't had any problems. It does become a problem when you're mixing personal Gmail accounts and school, but that doesn't usually happen.
Right. No, I totally understand. And I taught big kids too, who sometimes had their own Google accounts, but then of course we were just using school accounts for school related things. I have a few people who have questions about Google Classroom. You can reach out to me on Twitter. I do have some resources. As a teacher of big kids, I was using both Google Classroom and Seesaw all the time. I didn't give up one in favor of the other. They just were both different parts of my workflow.
That's right. I use both as well. I teach older students as well, and I use Google Classroom and I use Seesaw, and they're not separate. I'm able to use them together. Right. They're just different workflow tools.
Absolutely.
Example.
Go ahead.
Sorry, a beautiful example in our Padlet comes from the person who was at the top that may not be anymore. She said she uses Google Classroom to pass out or give directions using a video of how they're going to use the activities in Seesaw. So I just wanted to give a shout out to that example.
Oh, that is a great example. I mean, I liked what I think Tanya said earlier about, and I was doing this when I was teaching high school students, I was using Google tools for a lot of the collaboration, but then in Seesaw is where we were saving and sharing and, getting authentic feedback, from other stakeholders, including parents and family members. So 2 different parts of the digital workflow, I think. Okay, ladies, I think we need to wrap up tonight, but I want to encourage all of our listeners, if you didn't get your question answered, or if you want to dialogue further, I'm sure Holly and Tanya would be happy to answer questions. If you can see their Twitter handles right there on the slide, and you can see where to connect with them in their Facebook group. This was a wonderful session tonight, and I'm just so thankful that they were willing to share with us. I hope our listeners will join us again soon for another PD. Remember, it's web.seesaw.me/PDs. Holly, Tanya, thank you so much. I enjoyed it very much and learned so many new things.
Bye. Thank you so much for having us. Thank you to everyone who came. We really appreciate everything you do in the classroom.
Yes.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.